Okay, let's start. Myself, Praful. I'm with my partner, Janik. He's not here. Our topic is identifying key players and playing styles of 10 English Premier League teams during offensive sequences in 21-22 season. So, we both are from TUM. I'm more developing my expertise in validation studies with tracking technologies. My specialization is Vicon and other motionless tracking technologies. I'm also working with Connexion. Maybe you have heard about it. Janik is mainly from football expertise. He's UEFA A-level coach as well and enriched experience of football. So let's see. This is the structure, how we will be understanding. We will be starting with the problem statement. Then we'll follow up with the study sample, then methods which we use, and then we'll discuss about results, in the end, limitations and future potential. So we are discussing a lot about team possession since the morning. We all know possession sequences, and there are a lot of different perspectives we know that gives us the indication what are the different strategies adopted by the teams which leads to success. However, in today's context, majority of the practices which are happening in the analytics world for soccer, the use of location and temporal parameter is more prevalent. Hence, we also need to see that the player positions, their roles in the sequences, how key players play, also how individual players contributed into the team tactics, plus the team dynamics, connectivity. This is also an important aspect which we also need to give an answer. And that's where StatsBomb data is really, really important because it gives us event information a lot. So this helps us to develop the hypothesis, and here we try to give, or let's say we try to make an attempt in order to have a quantification dimension which can tell us how can we understand about the player roles, the team tactics, and how they play. In our study, we only included 10 teams, each team 38 matches because of the number of matches we have for the 10 teams, which are equal. We only include players played over 1,000 minutes because just to reduce the variability. Possession sequence, this is an example of Manchester City possession sequence. I guess at least 5 people have talked about possession sequence. I don't need to repeat what possession sequence is. It starts when a team has a possession, end it when a team lost possession. This is an important slide, method. So our study is based on 3 pillars. The first is the possession sequence framework. I will be explaining this more briefly in the coming slide. So we created this possession sequence framework analysis for all the teams. The results will be coming. Then we developed each possession sequence of each possession sequence category into centrality measures. And there, the centrality measures, we use 2 centrality measures to understand. And then we create a correlation to see how the centrality measures performs with on-ball value, which is standard StatsBomb metrics. We all know about it. Let's understand about possession sequence framework. This is the key aspect of our study because here we created 4 categories. In this study, we only included shot and goal sequences as one category. But we calculated partially successful sequences as well, which means where the possession sequence, the team retains the possession. Unsuccessful sequence, where the team lost the possession. We believe that this helps us to narrow down at how players play in the situations where the score is scored or the team lost the possession. Then what we did, we created this for all the teams for possession sequences, and then we measure their centrality measures. So I hope everyone is very familiar about centrality measures, but I can give you a short example here. We know the Manchester City example of possession sequence. If we see the down below graph, that's the centrality graph. Here, the dots represents the player, and the lines in the position represents how they are being weighted. In our study, we created a directed network, but we didn't include the direction into the analysis. Now, let me tell you about the first parameter of closeness centrality, which we use. It helps us to indicate well-connected player. Means, in a team, if there is a player, for example, in this case, Riyad Mahrez has a higher centrality value of closeness because he is available, he is the center, let's say in a general way. On the other hand, we also included betweenness centrality, which helps us to indicate about the player who is equally involved with other team members. In this case, the highest betweenness value is of Laporte, because he is very well connected directly with the player. So also in general with the research, if you can have a look, we can understand closeness tell us about which player is important, and betweenness tell us about the density, so density play. On-ball value, I hope everyone is very much aware about. This is how we calculated the on-ball value. And this is a little bit dense slide, which is important. So these are 4 equations. So the first equation that helps us to evaluate parameter value of a player in a match. Then we normalize with the second equation the values, the average values into per 90 minutes. Then in all the matches, players' average parameter value is being taken out by mean. And the last equation helps us to calculate our 2 important metrics, which are called as player centrality parameter ratio, which is both from closeness and betweenness. Here, what we did is we divided player average centrality parameter value in unsuccessful sequences by shot and goal sequences. This tells us that how much a player is involved in shot and goal sequences in comparison to unsuccessful sequences. Let's start with the results. So in the results, we can clearly see the first result, 10 teams. Manchester City was the leading team. Here, we didn't include the goals which are opponent made by themselves. So excluding the self goal, this is the result we find out. The Manchester City goal are highest with the shot and goal attempt as well. And they are having least unsuccessful sequences. If we compare to Leeds United, which has the highest number of unsuccessful sequences in comparison to shot and goal sequences. So there is an inverse relationship. Next result is betweenness. So this picture shows us on the x-axis, we can see players' average betweenness value per 90 minutes in unsuccessful sequence. And on the y-axis, we have the shot and goal sequences. Here we find out that there is a linear correlation among high-ranked teams and teams' high number of average betweenness value of the player, means the density. What is interesting for us is to find out that for team, we find different groups. So as you can see of the Manchester City, and we also find out the same for Liverpool. Let's go more into the team understanding. So the first graph shows the Manchester City graph, the second is the Liverpool. Here it's very important because Manchester City demonstrate a possession-based style of play across all 3 stages. We can find the back players on far right, then we have midfielders, and then we have forward player in the end. This also shows that there is a higher betweenness, means density play among their back players and midfielders. If we see the Liverpool on the other hand side, it only has 2 groups. There is a high betweenness in the midfielder and also in the back player, which signifies that there is a lot more coordination among these players, and then the forward players are coming up. The most also interesting thing here is that the Salah and Mane, which are the forward players of the Liverpool, has a higher betweenness value in comparison to Manchester City. The next graph shows the Chelsea and Arsenal. We also know that Chelsea also has a possession-based game play, which can also be visible here. There are different groups we can find out for Chelsea as well, where we can see that there is a lot more coordination in midfielders and the forward player. For Arsenal, the pattern goes as well, but we can also find more wing-back players and more midfielder play. So they are also comprising different strategies. When we go with the result of closeness, here we didn't find a very strong correlation because we wanted to see that, or we were expecting that there are maybe more top-ranked team players are also on the far right, but we found many different dynamics here. Let's zoom in. So closeness, once again, I'll repeat, closeness helps us to understand about how a player is importantly connected among other team members. And in closeness, we find out that Manchester City players, they are in one group, means there is no one important player in Manchester City, which also indicates, or which also kind of gives the clear direction, which we got it from betweenness, that there is a coordination among different lines. And if we see on the other hand in the Liverpool, we find out there are more groups. And what is interesting for us is the back player of Liverpool has a very high closeness value, and they are having a lot more importance. The midfielder have a lower value, which indicates the midfielders are the connectors between the forward and the back player. So this kind of gives the indication how the team plays or how their playing style is. For Chelsea also, we didn't find many groups. So there's just one group where all players are landing. Of course, there is exceptions, but in general, and this also shows that in the dense playing or in the possession-based playing style, we don't find very high closeness value of a single player or certain players. The second example is also very interesting because here in Manchester United, we can see there is a mixed style of play. On the far right, there is Shaw, there is Cristiano Ronaldo. They are important players. This player are giving back the ball to them again and again. Now, let's go into the correlation of OBP and betweenness ratio. So here we calculated this betweenness ratio, which I explained on the equation 4. And on the y-axis, we created average OBP value in shot and goal sequences per 90 minutes. Here we find out a moderate correlation, means the player who has a higher betweenness value also have a higher OBP value. So metrics also explains about how the player is playing in the team, how their interaction, and they are also kind of giving the explanation that their action performance is also in a positive direction. Also, the team with more intact and possession-based playing style players can be found far right because of the betweenness value. If we see the top 20 players here in the betweenness ratio, 3 players of the top 5 players belongs to Manchester City. Then we also have one Chelsea player, and then we have Arsenal player, more possession-based style of play. When we see the correlation study of the OVP and closeness ratio, we also find a moderate correlation there. 0.34 is the R-square value is the same as betweenness ratio. Here also we can say that top player ranked teams are far right, but it's a little bit different when we see the top 20 closeness ratio players. If we see here, of course, the Manchester City players are also, again, having a very high rankings, but we can see Mohamed Salah, Alexander-Arnold, also here Mason Greenwood, Shaw, and other lower ranked teams. So this indicates that these are the important players in their team, or we can interpret that. In conclusion, we wanted to give an attempt to see how can quantitatively we can comprehend the context of the team and then understand or interpret the playing style of the team, which I believe that study initiated. We also find out key players, how the key players are, how they are playing. In the research, when we always see that the center players are the most important player, but when we see from this aspect, we can see that players betweenness ratio explains different contexts, means we can find top 20 players, they are also midfielders, back player, and forward players. Diverse influence and roles. Finding on betweenness and closeness and centrality highlights diverse player roles within each team's play behavior. Initially, central positions increase importance may not be obvious. What is very key finding for us is that in the high-ranked teams, the build-up is mainly initiated by the back players, and they extend the play a lot more because they are more higher in betweenness ratio and also in the closeness ratio. But we also find this not just in possession-based team playing style, but we also find the same thing in the Liverpool. Of course, the study also consists of several limitations. We only included one season analysis. We cannot include the context of when the player was injured, how their position changed in a match, and all other aspects. But we wanted to create this in the future by incorporating or trying to incorporate player decision-making into the analysis, which is not very easy. In the future, we wanted to include multiple seasonal analysis if the team dynamics hasn't changed a lot or the team players. Also, we wanted to include some more parameters of location and other temporal parameters in order to understand how the player plays in these betweenness situation or closeness situation. Also very important, it's very interesting to see this comparative study between different leagues, so we can also see how other league top teams play in this context. That's it from my side. Thank you.
So I guess, like looking at your results, so saying that Trent Alexander-Arnold is quite crucial for Liverpool, right, is probably not a shock. Were there any players that you were like quite surprised by maybe their importance for their teams?
For me, I think lower team was really remarkable. Like Pascal Gross was an exceptional that he was landing in the top 10 players with the highest closeness value. And I think this approach is very, very crucial to understand even the lower ranked team players as well, who are playing better in their team. Of course, they didn't got supported by other player or other contextual situations. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Ollie, 1 second.
Thanks. When you're going back to the, when you were regressing on-ball value against your closest metrics, were there particular players that were, or sort of types of players that were sort of massively outperforming in terms of, or underperforming in terms of quality compared to sort of how their level on the closest metric? Like,
Yeah, it's a very relevant question. So in this study, I didn't go into critical view of who performed well or didn't perform well, but it's possible. We can see, and that was the target, because the thing is when we create models, for example, where we kind of merge everything into one dimension, and then we try to see what are the possibilities. I think when we have this kind of framework where we see short and goal sequences or partially or unsuccessful, that gives some more clarity. And then we can also understand in which situation the team is losing or how the player is not able to perform. So I think with the metrics, it's possible. I didn't put it here, but it's possible. Yeah.
Can we thank Praful again?